Hi there everybody, and welcome to the second lesson in our series on using Google Sheets. Now remember, in the previous lesson we started to build up a budget template. In this lesson we're going to continue that process, and we're going to start to dip our toes into some of the more advanced features of spreadsheets and Google Sheets. Now the first feature I want to show you is that sometimes you want to restrict the kind of information that people can put into a spreadsheet. And the technical term for that is called data validation. All that really means is that we want the spreadsheet to validate or check the data that is being put into a particular cell and reject if that data, if it doesn't meet certain criteria. We're going to do that in the currency column of the assumptions tab, the assumption sheet that we started to build up last time. Take a look. Now you might remember that last time we set up this column in our assumptions sheet for currency. And what we want to do is restrict the kinds of currencies that people can enter into these cells. So I'm going to do that on one cell up top here, cell C8, and I'm going to select the data menu, and from that select validation. Now the first thing you'll notice is that I've currently only got cell C8 selected, so that's the range that I'm working with. The criteria, well, you've got a number of ways to set up the criteria. But the way that I would like to use for now is a list of items. So in other words, this is going to make sure that only the entries that are in this list are accepted by the spreadsheet. And the entries that I would like to accept are South African Rand, US dollar, and Euro. If someone inserts invalid data, you've got the option of just showing a warning but still accepting the data, or actually rejecting the input. I want to reject the input. And I do also want to show some help. And the help that I'd like, the help message I'd like to display is select, the base currency for this unit cost. And the last thing I want to make sure that is selected is that we've got an end cell button to show that there is data validation happening on the cell. So once you've got all of that set up, all that you need to do is click on Save. And you can see now that this cell has that little drop-down arrow, which indicates that there is now data validation happening on the cell. And if I click on that drop-down arrow, there are the list of items that I can now select from. So I can select US dollars. Note that if I selected or try to type in anything else and I click away, it's going to say, oops, there was a problem, and the data that you entered in cell violates the data validation rules. And there is the help message that I entered in just to help people understand what they need to do inside the cell. Now, I could either select all the cells over here and set up the data validation exactly like I've done before. But the other way that we can do that is to autofill this data validation. So you can really select the way that you think works best for you. But you'll notice here that there are some cells where I don't really want data validation. That's just a heading cell and a row, and that's just another heading row. So in these rows, I want to remove the validation. Go through exactly the same steps as before: data, validation, and this time simply remove validation. Do that one more time over here: data, validation, remove validation. Okay, so now we're ready to start entering in some of the resources that we're going to use for this project, just to show you how the template's going to work. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that this is a software development project, and one of the resources that I need is obviously a developer. So I'm going to enter that there. The unit type, well, this is a per day resource, so I'm going to pay him for every day that he works. The currency I'm going to pay him in is South African Rands, and the cost per day, 1,000. But now obviously this is a currency cost, so I want to format it in a way that shows that it's a currency without actually inserting any specific currency values like Rand for ZAR, South African rands, or a dollar sign. Now, to do the cell formatting on currency, all that I need to do is go to the Format Number option, and from here I can select Financial or Currency. Now you can see that currency is going to add in a currency symbol. Financial is just going to format it in a nice financial way, which is currency independent. Now the next piece of information I need to add is the profit margin that I'm going to apply to this developer resource that I'm going to charge the client. So that goes inside this cell over here in the profit margin column, and I'm going to say that I'm going to make a 20% profit. And another way of writing 20% is 0.2, but that doesn't look very friendly. So once again, I want to format this as a number, which is a percentage. And you'll see now it has automatically selected the percentage sign, and that's what I formatted, but it's included 2 decimal places. And I want to get rid of those 2 decimal places. Well, here's a shortcut key that will remove 1 decimal place at a time. So click it twice to remove all the decimal places. Now I'm ready to calculate the total cost per unit for this resource. Now we're ready to enter in a formula, a mathematical formula. And just like in Microsoft Excel, all formulae in Google Sheets must start with an equal sign. If they don't start with an equal sign, Google Sheets doesn't know that you're trying to enter in a formula, and it's going to render what you enter just as ordinary text. So inside the cell, I want to enter a formula, so we start with equals. And now I want to calculate what the total cost is. Cost per unit, click on that cell, multiplied by the profit margin, click on that cell, and press enter to calculate. Now you'll notice that there is an error in my formula. But before we go and fix the error, I just want to make sure that everybody is clear on why we use cell references and not values. And the reason is, if I were to calculate that using the actual values inside those cells, the formula would not be sensitive to changes inside those cells, changes in those numbers. But now we need to change the formula, because that is not the total cost. That is just the profit that we're going to make on this resource per day. So to change that formula, you can either go to the formula bar at the top here or double click in the cell. Either will work. And I want to make sure that this doesn't just calculate the profit, but adds that profit to the base cost. So the formula becomes 1 plus the profit margin. And notice that I've put that calculation inside brackets, because Google Sheets works with BODMAS. So there is the total cost, the total base cost for this resource, base cost of 1,000 Rand per day, plus the profit margin of 20% is a total of 1,200 Rand. And once again, I would like to format this. Now I can either go through format number, or I can simply select the cell that we have already formatted, use the Paint Format button to copy that formatting, and click on the cell that we'd like to apply that same formatting to. Now, I mentioned a little moment ago this word BODMAS, and I just want to make sure that everyone is clear about what I meant. BODMAS is an acronym that we sometimes teach kids at school in terms of the order of operations. So basically, you need to make sure that you understand the order of operations, because it's that order of operations that Google Sheets is going to apply when it goes through your formula to generate the final values. Now, I want to take the formula that I've set up and apply them to the rest of my assumptions page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the formula that I've set up in this cell, and I'm simply going to autofill it all the way down. Now you'll notice that each of these now says 0, and that's for a very good reason. And here's another reason why it's better to use cell references, not real numbers, when you are using mathematical formula. Because I've autofilled this cell from row 8 into row 9, can you see that the formula has automatically changed from being D8 and E8 to D9 and E9? And the reason it's 0 is because we don't have any values in these cells. But if I were to add some values, let's say 100 and 10%, look, 110 Rand. You can also see that these cells don't have the formatting that the top cells do, and I want to change that as well. So I'm going to select that first cell, use the paint format, and apply that formatting all the way down here to the bottom, and do exactly the same of this formatting, and apply that all the way to the bottom. And the reason, just to point out that these cells all took the same formatting, was because we used autofill on that. Autofill will autofill the value or the formula and the formatting of that cell. Now, the last big thing I want to show you in this lesson is how to start using some of the built-in functions inside Google Sheets to add a lot of value to the formula that you're using. Just quickly, the difference between functions and formulae. Well, a formula is basically a mathematical expression that you can add into Google Sheets to calculate certain values. A function is a specific mathematical function, a preset function inside Google Sheets that you can use inside your formulae to either add mathematical operators, like calculating the sine of an angle, or to add logic to your expressions. And it's the logic part that I want to show you quickly now. We've got this last column here, which is the total cost per unit in South African Rand, and we want that to understand what currency we have selected over here. So the first thing I'm going to do is start the formula with an equal sign. And the function that we're going to use to indicate the logic is the if function. Now, as I type, you can see that you get some helpful hints over here. So it's the if function that I'd like, and it shows you that this returns a value depending on a logical expression. So to start this function, I need to open up round brackets, and now you start to get some additional help, really, really useful help. You can go through this on your own, but I'm going to explain it as we go now. I want to check what the currency is. So what is the value inside this cell? So if C8 is equal to the currency of US dollars, so if C8 is equal to US dollars, I want the formula to do something. So to tell the formula what to do, I need to start with a comma. So this is the value, so that is the logical expression, if C8 is US dollars. What must the formula do if C8 is US dollars? Well, if it is US dollars, it must multiply the cost per unit, or rather the total cost per unit, this cell over here, by the exchange rate. Now remember, we hid the exchange rate up over here. So I'm just going to unhide those cells very quickly. Go back to my formula. So it must multiply the base rate by the exchange rate, which in this case is US dollars. So it's that cell over there. Comma is now what must it do if that expression is false? In other words, if C8 is not US dollars. Well, if C8 is not US dollars, just give me the value of the base rate over here, which is F8. Make sure that the open brackets are closed at the end and press equals. Now you'll see that this value is the same as this value over here because C8 is not US dollars. But what happens if I change this to US dollars? Look what's going to happen to the total cost per unit in South African rands. Can you see that it has changed? It's now 12,000 where it was 1,200. So I'm going to keep this as US dollars. And all that we now need to do is make sure that this column is formatted in South African rands. format number. I want to go to the more formats because I don't have, this currency is only in pounds. So more formats, more currencies, and I'd like to select the South African rand. So let's scroll down to find the South African rand. There it is, select it and apply. And now it's formatting it in South African rands. Now I hope you got all that. I want to go through that function one last time just to make sure that everyone is on the same page. So inside this formula, we used the if function to give us some logical expressions. So remember the if function, the first bit of that function requires the logical expression, and our logical expression is a test for whether C8 is equal to US dollars. After the comma is what to do if that expression is true, and after the next column, a comma, what to do if that expression is false. Now you'll notice in this that we haven't taken account of what happens if the currency is euro. We'll get to that in another lesson. But now it's time for me to autofill this to the rest of this column. And let's just do one more check to make sure that this is right. Right, we've got a value here. Let's check that this is correct. Okay, so ZAR, yes, the value is absolutely right. It's the same as this total cost because the base cost is South African rands. What happens to US dollars? Ooh, can you see that we've got a problem there? We know that the answer should be 10 times the South African rand base, or this base cost, because the exchange rate we've got working for us is 10, but it's not 10 times, it's more. It's 15 times. Let's see why that is. We're checking, is C9 US dollars? Well, that bit is correct. And now we're multiplying F9 by B, oh dear, by B5. Can you see what's happened? Because we autofilled the expression, all the references have moved one row down. What was row 4 has now become row 5. Thankfully, there's a really simple way for us to fix this. All that we need to do is in our first expression, in our first formula, we need to lock that row. And to lock a row, we put a $ in front of the row number. If we wanted to lock a column, we'd put the $ in front of the column reference. Let's try this again. Let's autofill this down. And is it right? Yes, now it's right. You can see that this is exactly 10 times the total cost per unit. And if we go into the formula, we can see that because we locked the row, as we autofilled, that row didn't change. Well, I hope you got all that. We're going to be doing a lot more of those kinds of functions and formulas in the lessons ahead. So we'll be getting a lot more practice in building up some quite complex functions and formula inside Google Sheets. But until then, bye-bye, and I'll see you next time.